Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Earlier in January we went on a bud hunt with the resting dendrobiums. Well, now we've reached the end of January, I'm going to do that again. So we're going to revisit each one of those plants in turn and see if they're badly desiccated, slightly desiccated. Is there any progress with buds? Are there any? All that sort of thing. So I'll get them down individually and we'll have a look at them as we go along. I'm filming this video today, which is Tuesday. It may well get posted on Wednesday because I've also started another video today. But I don't know how far I'm going to get with watering today, and I must get my mounts done. And they need a small dose of feed in this round, whereas my resting dendrobiums, if they need some water, that would just be plain water, which I've got ready to go. So as I get each one down, we can make the decision, does it need some water, is it okay as it is, and are there any buds? And we'll make a nice separate video out of that. So let's get going. And when we've got a shed load of video editing to do, we need treats. Now obviously I'm not going to eat all of those, but I will pick at them. Those are my two raffle prizes from the last Orchid Society meeting. Most enjoyable. Okay, the first one to look at is Lodigessii, and those canes are desiccating. I won't say desiccated, but they're on their way. So this one's going to get a drop of water today. But on closer inspection, we have signs of new growth on this one in a couple of places. So it's coming back into growth. But this is going to be difficult to see. But opposite each leaf, we've got nubbins. I'm not pushing out at any great rate yet, but I can see they're there. I'm quite confident those bulges opposite the leaves were not there last time we looked. So I think we might actually going to be get this one to bloom. This is a new plant. If I get this to bloom out of its first winter, I'm going to be over the moon. These blooms are spectacular because for the size of the plant and the canes, they're enormous. You know, some dendrobiums have huge big fat canes and the blooms relative to that are not actually that big, whereas this one's the complete opposite. This has relatively large blooms and they are stunning. If I get some blooms on that, I'm going to be over the moon. But if you look at that cane, you know, sort of central in the shot now, opposite every single leaf there's a bulge. And I can only think that those are buds. Anybody who's had this one a while and seen it bloom on occasions, is that what the buds look like? I'd be interested to know, but I can't think what else they are. I mean, it's certainly not going to grow new leaves out of those points. But that one's going to have a drop of water today. It is coming into growth. There's a new growth there. Now that's not at the base of the plant, but it's at the base of the extension of the new cane. And there's also one there at nearer the base of that particular cane. And there's also another one down in there. So this one is starting into growth. So it's going to need a little bit of help to get those new growths going. And the canes are looking a little bit desiccated. So we'll pump this one up a bit today and see how we go. But it's still not going to get any feed. It's still only going to get plain water for now. Obviously those new growths will take their energy from whatever is stored in the canes for now, but this may well be the first one to come out of the rest. You know, they say don't withhold the water until you see the new growths, but this is a new plant. I don't want to go mad. You know, I don't want to degrade the effect of the budding, if you see what I mean. So I don't want to dramatically bring it out of its rest. It's got to be a gradual process, but I think we've got buds on that one. That's definite progress because they weren't there last time. So +1 to Roger. Alright, this next one is Dendrobium Aphyllum. This was the gift Kiki from Alberto in Italy, and all I was happy to do with this one through this winter is keep it alive and start some new growths, because although it's big, it is still a Kiki and obviously separated from its mother plant. Nonetheless, it had a good root system, so it's capable of supporting itself. That's not really a problem. Most of the leaves have dropped off, but I mean we don't need to go on a bud hunt for this one, do we? They're there. They're already forming their buds, and it looks like you get a nubbin followed by the extension, followed by the buds starting to form. So we are going to get some blooms on that. I'd be grateful for one bloom on that, quite honestly, because I wasn't expecting anything from it. So everything that comes on this is a bonus. I'm grateful to an extent that it hasn't gone mad and bloomed over the whole length of the cane, because it would drain it quite dramatically. So for it to get a few blooms out is okay, but I'm glad it's not too many this time round. And then the idea with this one will be to get at least one, hopefully 2 or 3 new growths going this year, push them on hard, hopefully get them to the same length of this as this, if not longer. So that's what I'm on about, feed and water well. If you think about the growing season and how relatively short it is in the UK, these growths have got to get from there down to there to be equal or equivalent to the cane it's already got. And it may be this year in its first season with me that they don't grow that long. But, we'll wait and see. But we've definitely got buds on that one. Those were showing last time round, so that's nothing new. They've just extended a bit since then. So they're coming on, and I'm pleased that this one looks like it's going to make it. Now, this is one of the squashed grape plants. Relatively new to me, this one. This was got during last year, so this is its first rest. I don't expect miracles, but nonetheless the bulbs are large enough and mature enough to be able to bloom, but whether I can get it to bloom will probably depend on what happened to it last year before I got it, and that's unknown, obviously. Depends whether this plant is genuinely in its proper season or whether that was messed up prior to me getting it, if you see what I mean. If that was pushed into bloom at the wrong time, then it may be out of season. But there are no signs of buds on this anyway yet, or spikes I should say. They're not buds on this thing. And this one naturally desiccates to a degree. It's getting a bit much at the moment, so I will give that a drop of water today. It's just literally a matter of trickling some water around the outside of the plant where the exposed roots are. I'm not absolutely soaking that moss that it's sitting in, because that would stay wet too long. I just want to give it a little bit of hydration, nothing more. So just where these bare roots are, just trickle a bit of water over that, just a little bit. Sort of the equivalent of a morning dew, something like that. It's a nice plant. It grew well last year, pushed up a lot of new growths. But whether I can get it to bloom or not, we will wait and see. But the plant's doing okay. I just don't want it to desiccate too much. We'll see how it goes. I bet that one loved the cool temperature last night. Coming on. And as usual, I forgot to say what it was. This is Jenkinsii crossed with aggregatum. I got a horrible feeling aggregatum's been renamed. They keep playing about with these, mucking about with the names. There are quite a lot that are incredibly similar, quite honestly. But anyway, that's what I'm calling it. That's what's on the tag, and that's as it's staying in my book. Now this is the weird looking one with the weird shaped canes. This is Dendrobium Friedrichi. And this is still doing a bit of autumn. There's still a few leaves dropping in places. I always like to, if they're loose enough to just pick off, I always take them off. The problem being, if I don't, because they're up in the roof, those leaves fall down on other plants, and if I don't see them, they could, cause some problems. But this one has got a little bit of desiccation on the, these are the 3 new canes. I believe, yeah, well, at least these 2 are definitely, possibly that one as well. And then these are the previous years, and those are the oldest ones that were there when I got it. I doubt if those are going to bloom. Those are at least 2.5, 3 years old now. They still could, but last year's growths do have buds, and they are sort of extending slowly. So this one's a debate. Although the bulbous parts of these canes have shriveled back a bit, there aren't that many buds showing yet. So this one's in a halfway house. I don't want to break this one's resting period by overdosing on the water, but I think I will just hydrate a small section of the roots. I mean, the roots on this one go round the whole mount, and most of them are almost bare roots. There's very little moss on this one. They're all round the back and everything, so I can just hydrate a small portion of that root system. Just get a little bit in there, I think. But it does look like it's budding. It did do that last year, and the buds turned out to be Kikis. That's why I want to go careful with the water. I don't want to push it. I really do want to. If this blooms, it will be the first time, and I will be well pleased. But it did that last year, and they turned into Kikis, so I'm reluctant to get this thing wet by any means. And yet again, look. If you look at the very top of the plant, there's a new growth, so it's starting into growth as well as pushing some buds. So the rest has worked, I think, but I don't want to break the resting period on that one yet. I still want to hold off for a bit. It might only be for another couple of weeks, but I'd like to see those buds extending and looking a bit more like they're going to be blooms before I push my luck. So we'll see how that one goes. So tiniest amount of water for that one today. Now this is the other squash grape plant. This is actually the species Dendrobium jenkinsi. And looking over this, there are no signs of any spikes starting yet. This one is quite desiccated. You know, the latest growths on this have shriveled back. This is to be expected, but I don't like it. But again, you know, if there's no signs of spikes yet, this one has actually bloomed for me. It bloomed for the first time last spring, and it was a very weak blooming. I think it either had 2 spikes of 2 each, or one with 2 on, I forget. But it did bloom. Blooms are gorgeous. But I don't want to push my luck and overcook this one, but it needs a drop of water. It is getting quite desiccated now, so I'll give it the equivalent of a morning dew, just a gentle water round where I can see some bare roots and not get the moss wet if I can help it. You know, there's a bit there where I can pour some water on, where there's just some bare roots on the bark and hanging off the extension on the plant. So we'll give that one a drop and see how we go. As I say, if the bulbs get too desiccated, it's what naturally happens. If you look at the centre of the plant, that's the older bits. Some of the bulbs are completely dying back now, and some of the less older ones are shriveled right down and leafless. That is its progression. And then the new growths are big and fat during their growing season, and they are expected to do that. But yeah, that one's going a bit beyond what I like, so I'm going to just give that a trickle. No sign of spikes yet. Now this one is Dendrobium primulinum, but I believe the name's changed now. It's called something else, but I'm sticking with that for the time being. Now this one, the new growths last year were this one, and this smaller one up here. And they are still plenty plump enough. So this one's not getting any water. That's plump enough. I mean, the older canes went into their rest looking like that, if you see what I mean. So, you know, they're not the problem. I must admit that cane feels like it's hanging off the plant. It feels loose. But I'll leave it there. I mean, if it's gonna shed a cane, then it can do it. No sign of new growth at the base there. And I don't see any signs of buds on last year's growth. Not yet. That one has bloomed for me before, but it was 2 years ago. It didn't bloom last year at all. So we'll see what we can do with that one this year. I've got a feeling that this is one of those that, although it needs the winter rest, it doesn't actually bloom at the end of winter, early spring. It blooms later in the spring. So expecting buds this early might be a bit wishful thinking. But the canes aren't desiccated. No desiccation, no water. That's the way I'm doing it. I don't see any signs of buds on there yet. So patiently wait as we do. No water for you. What are you doing then? Does Fluffy Cat come to say hello? Meow. What you doing then? Hey, what you doing then? Ugh, he's not normally out and about downstairs in the daytime. So perhaps the builders have disturbed his snooze upstairs. Right, back to business. We're getting to the biggies now. This is Dendrobium Friedrichianum, and I wouldn't expect to see buds on this because this is a late spring bloomer. So I'm not expecting to see any buds, and that's exactly what I'm seeing, no buds. Strictly speaking, this one's only just finished and got its terminal leaves on its canes, literally in the last few weeks. Up till then, it's still been pushing the length on these canes. But they've all stopped growing now. And I've actually found a couple of mealybugs on this one today in the luxurious growth here. Little tykes. But not enough to warrant getting a spray out. It was just a nice, pleasurable experience to squash the little tykes. But yeah, I mean, this one's still got some actively growing roots. It's only just stopped maturing these canes and getting to the terminal leaf. So not enough desiccation to warrant watering at the moment, I don't think. They are a little bit, but not much. If this one's a late spring bloomer, in theory, I don't know for sure, it might mean that this one would normally, in its natural environment, start quite a late winter rest. In other words, it's still got some warmth and some moisture later in the year. So it starts its rest later, which explains why it blooms later in the spring, because it starts the resting period later. I don't know that for sure, but there are some like that, you know, where sometimes that drier, colder season comes early. You know, and obviously those dendrobiums, they start their rest quite early. They're the ones that are most likely to bloom late winter, early spring, because they started the resting period early. But yeah, it's finished growing now completely. No growth, no active growth. So we'll let it sit and see what we get. This one has bloomed for me before, and the spikes and the blooms are actually quite slow to develop, and I didn't make a note of how long they take. So although this is a late spring bloomer, you know, if they are slow progress type spikes and buds, they may start soon. But no water for that one today, but probably next time round. So we'll leave that one for another week or two. Now we're getting to the real long cane stuff here, and I mean, without standing outside, there's no way I can ever get the whole plant in the shot. This is Glamouratum, Dendrobium Glamouratum. Now I have had blooms on this. I must have done because I've got a picture of them, but my memory doesn't say how long ago it was, so it was, I believe, a very long time ago. This one suffered seriously bad in its rest last year. It didn't take to that at all, probably just too weak to rest. But it recovered during the growing season last year. I mean, that's last year's cane. It's, strictly speaking, that cane is still growing. That is a new leaf coming out the top. I really do hope that's the last one. It's difficult to deal with them when they're still pushing a cane. I mean, it's pushed out another new growth here. It managed to do that at a silly time of year, like well into the growing season. So obviously it didn't have a full growing season to mature. So it's still quite short. And I think that one's still growing as well. Is there another leaf in there? Yep, so this one's still trying to grow. It just may be that it's out of season and it's taking longer to get back into the, you know, sort of proper thing. So it's difficult to know what to do with this. I mean, it has pushed out a lot of roots this year, and 2 canes on top. You know, I mean, this is what I bought, this little bit here. And that was its first year's growth with me. That's probably the one that bloomed. So obviously the progress on the plant is good. It's still got nowhere near a lot of canes. You know, I mean, if these are 2 or 3 years old, they're serving no purpose now. This one could still be holding some energy, but it's living on the new growths that it produced last year, and they are still growing. So, well, it needs a little bit of water then, doesn't it? Not really a lot of choice if it's still in growth. I don't remember when this one blooms, but it's a distant memory, but I've got a vague recollection that this is a late spring, early summer bloomer. And if that's the case, it's not necessarily the winter rest that triggers the blooms. It's just what it would get in the place where it lives. And it waits for the warmer weather before it produces its blooms, which could make sense because that could be when the pollinators are about. You know, these late winter, early spring things, you know, have they got enough of the relevant insects flying around that time of year to actually pollinate? So maybe some have got an inherent delay built in to make sure they've got pollinators around. That's possible. That's only a theory. I don't know that for sure. But it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Anyway, still growing, that one. And I've now got a wet arm because the fogger's on and I'm stood right in it. Damp elbow. That's right on my dodgy shoulder as well. It's not going to do it a lot of good. Yes, it's still not better, but it's not as bad as it was. Yeah, so a bit of water for that one just because it's still growing, and you know, if it hasn't really started its rest yet at the end of January, I don't hold out a lot of hope for this one. But if it's a late bloomer, you never know. We'll see what happens. This is another one of the long cane dendrobiums, and I mean long cane. Nearly a metre long, these things, if not, in fact, some of them are over a metre long. This is a new plant. I got this early last year, and I'm now relatively confident it was out of season when I got it. So it came into growth late. Nonetheless, it matured that cane. Yeah? So I did well with that cane. Unfortunately, it pushed out these 2 growths halfway through the growing season. I'm not sure that one's going to make it. That's on the older part of the plant. I was hoping to rejuvenate that part of the plant, and this one is a weak, short cane. But nonetheless, it will provide some energy into the plant. I mean, it's a nice fat cane, basically. But this proper cane, as I call it, started at the beginning of the season. This had nubbins the full length of the cane, so I'm confident this one's going to bloom. They alternate, so... Hello, you saying hello again? You're fretting, aren't you? Something's upsetting him. It's probably the builders, but it alternates the buds, so you get every other node down one side and then every other node down the other side. But it looks like it's going to bloom from about here, maybe a bit further back, down as far as here. So I will get some I've forgotten what it's called now. Anosmum. Dendrobium anosmum. I will get some blooms. They will be the first blooms. As I said, I think it arrived with me out of season. So it's getting back into season because it is going to bloom at the right time. So that's good. But I think it's only going to bloom on this one cane. Because this cane, which was like that when I got it, has already bloomed. I can see the stumps, and I doubt if the, you know, shriveled little canes like this are never going to do anything. They can be trimmed off when I get round to it. There's at least 3. Those 3 can come off. They serve no purpose. They're completely desiccated and dying. So they can come off, tidy the plant up a bit. And hopefully this back end of the plant might produce another new growth when we get going in the season. Pushed out a lovely root system. You know, I was well pleased with that. But it's not growing. Even that short cane has got a terminal leaf, so it has stopped growing. It is resting. This one's finished growing. And I do have nubbins starting to form. So given that this cane with the nubbins on is not desiccated at all, and nor is that one, you're going back up on the shelf. No water for you. and give it another period of rest. As I say, my idea of not watering at all is I'm closer to that this year because I'm monitoring the plants. I'm keeping my eye on them. So they only get water if they're showing signs of going beyond what I call a healthy desiccation. And although I've got high humidity in the air, there's no substitute for a bit of morning dew now and again on the roots, which they would get in their natural environment. Well, I'm not giving them that by withholding the water. But if the canes aren't desiccating, they don't need it. So it's just a matter of plant by plant, and a plant by plant assessment each time I get them down. The frequency I get them down will have to increase during February because the day lengths are going to really rocket. We're up to 9 hours plus now. We'll be heading up towards 10.5 hours by the end of February. It's going to trigger the growth one way or the other. So if they haven't finished resting and they start growing, tough. They'll have to start getting watered. And then as the growth start pushing on, they'll need some feed. Yeah, so it's a balancing act. But this one's going to bloom. I'm pleased with that. You know, this is its first spring with me. To get blooms this time, good stuff. So I'm pleased with that. It's a massive plant. It did not cost me a lot of money either. When that arrived, I was over the moon at such a sized plant for such a small amount of pennies. Well pleased with that. Growing okay, doing okay. Right, this is the last one now. This is Dendrobium Nester, which is an anosmum cross. What it's crossed with, I can't remember, but this was got 2 years ago in bloom at the RHS show. So that would have been April time. So obviously that had come out of its winter rest and had bloomed, and it was the blooms that attracted me to this one, not the price, because I paid a bit for this one, shall we say. But I just fell in love with the blooms and the fragrance. Smells of raspberries, it's gorgeous. So I brought it home in bloom, and during that season it grew this nice long cane. Yeah, by far longer than anything it had done before. I was over the moon with that, and that bloomed literally from right up here right down to here. It bloomed the full length of the cane. It was a spectacle. It actually got me a first at one of the orchid societies, I forget which one, and I remember one of the growers actually coming up to me and saying, "You've really got your head round these resting dendrobium types, haven't you?" I'm surprised because there are very few of us that even bother with them because we can't be bothered with the hassle. Well, I can. I'm in a position where I can do it to a degree. I can't do it perfectly because I can't get it cold enough. It would be better to drop down another 4 or 5 degrees like it was this morning, but I have to average because I've got a lot of other plants in here that won't take that level of cold on a long-term basis. So anyway, we got blooms on that. Last year we grew these 3 canes. Now they're not as long, but it grew 3. So I'm not sure I can call that progress, because strictly speaking progress is geared up to canes being at least as big as the year before, if not bigger, till they reach their limit. But I got 3 of them instead of 1, and the nubbins are truly embryo nubbins, but they are there. They are just starting to show. So and this is not an early bloomer. This is a late spring bloomer. I think this one comes into bloom around April time. So it is one of the ones that starts later. I mean, it's dropped a lot of its leaves on the newer canes. That's good. It should be doing that. And if it doesn't drop them all before the warmer weather comes, it certainly will then. And then hopefully we can get a nice shed load of new growths. Quite honestly, if I get another 3 new growths, I'll be over the moon. But I'll be over the moon better if I can grow them to their full length this time round. This is fully seasoned. It's acclimatized to my environment, so there's no reason why this year's new growth shouldn't push on really well. So they should start at the right time and everything. So yeah, so this one's a bit behind some of the others, the long cane ones, but nonetheless it's just starting now. And that has 2 or 3 quite large blooms on each one of the nodes where it decides to bloom. And I think it's going to bloom on all 3 canes. I mean, looking at the one that's managed to hold on to nearly all its leaves, it's still showing signs. So I think... What is up with you today? Eh? I'm stressing today for some reason. This could be because my daughter's not here. I mean, you know, they grew up with my daughter from hand-fed kittens. And, you know, she looked after them for their first sort of 3 years of their life before they came to me because she moved and couldn't keep them anymore. And she's been down all weekend making a fuss of them. So perhaps he's fretting because she's not here today. You are a soppy cat, aren't you? Hey. You know the way to stop fretting? Go back to sleep. Funny cat. He's a very affectionate cat, that one, but he frets at so many little things. He spooks at noises. If it comes on to rain, he'll run away because he doesn't like the noise on this roof. Fireworks, he goes missing for like half a day at a time. You know, fireworks start in the evening, he runs away somewhere, I don't know where he goes, and then he comes back in the small hours when it goes quiet again. Very, very timid cat, but very affectionate. He sits on my lap all evening and makes me legs go to sleep because he's heavy. Right, where did we get to? That's the last one, yes, and we do have signs of nubbins on this one. We're going to get some blooms, but as I said, this is a late spring bloomer, so they're only just starting to make a move. And as far as the canes are concerned, they're still plump, they're still happy, so no water for you. Back up on the shelf. This is good fun at the moment because my shoulder's a bit achy, shall we say. These ones right up in the roof are a pain, literally, because I do have to stretch out. So I think I'm going to try and put them all back with my left hand. So look out, we're going to knock some plants over, I expect. I mean, if you're right-handed, you're obviously clumsier with your left hand, aren't you? And vice versa. But anyway, we'll see if we can get them all back up, and then I need to crack on because that's my plain water feeding done. The rest of the mounts today need a drop of feed, so you know, I can add that in, get that mixed up. So I'll get all the resting ones back in their place. Look how much light I get when all those flipping great long cane things are out of the way. But that row up there are not resting plants. Those are plants that are in the regular watering routine. The far row up there, that's all resting dendrobiums up there, and this centre section as near to the light as I can get are also resting dendrobiums. The other two that go up there are Hercoglossum and Harveyanum, but they're not resting types as such. So and they're both still actively growing, so you know they're in the very, very light feed and watering regime, which is about to be what the rest of the mounts get. So that's a quick update on the true resting types. I'll add this one in, even though I filmed it recently, because strictly speaking, this Senili should be resting, but as you can see, it's not, and that's because I deliberately have not withheld water. It was pushing out new growths. I got this back in the summer in June, and instead of one plant it turned out to be lots of little ones, and the lots of little ones have pushed out good, strong new growths, and there's no way I was going to jeopardize that plant this winter. So I've kept that one going, and then I'll push on all the growths that are pushing out now. There's new growths pushing out in many places. I'm going to push them on this season, feed and water well. Now this is a strange dendrobium. Most dendrobiums like good light. Well, in the growing season this one doesn't. This comes from a more shady environment, so I need to get this one down out of the roof into a place where it gets a little bit less light to grow it on through the summer. But it'll certainly come into the feed and water well category during this next growing season. Extend the good root system it's managed to produce, push on those new growths, and then next winter we'll turn it into a tarantula, because if I rest this, you can virtually guarantee virtually every leaf on it will drop. we'll end up with hairy tarantula legs and no leaves. It does look sorry for itself when it's resting, but yeah, if you want the blooms, you got to give it that extra light in the winter. Once the leaves fall, it's going to get exposed to good, strong, bright light where it comes from. So, and in the case with this one, it doesn't really dry off totally where it comes from. But it does get that bright light. Deciduous forest, the leaves fall, and it does come from an area where there's not as much mist around as some of the others, not sort of like a montane atmosphere anyway. So it does get good strong light in the winter. So we'll give it that next year. As you can see, this one's not in the same place as the others. It's up near the roof, but it's completely shaded. It never gets any direct light, and that's because it's growing. And that's more like what it would get. But come the stronger light, once the sun starts coming in through the roof, it's not staying there. It's coming down somewhere where it's shaded by other plants and never gets any direct light. It'll probably get hung under here or something where it's shaded by everything above. But it'll come down out of the roof once we get into the... Once the sun comes up and starts coming through the roof, then we'll get that one down and give it less light. And as those growths start to push on a bit better, we'll start feeding it a little bit more, because it only gets a trickle feed at the moment, which is what everything is getting this time of year. So I'll leave that one there, and we'll pick up on them again probably in a couple of weeks and see what progress we've got. But we have some, that's good. So at the moment I'm pretty pleased with what's going on with the resting dendrobiums. It's the best rest I can give them. So this is as good as it gets. Anything that doesn't bloom now probably isn't going to. So hopefully we get blooms on everything. The only two exceptions really, the squash grape plants as I call them, I would keep them for the plants even if they don't bloom, because I like them. I like the look of them, I like the way they grow. So they'll stay even if they don't bloom, and they really don't take up much space. So, you know, they're not a problem, whether they bloom or not. I'm happy to keep those, and we'll see what happens with the rest of them. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.